Hi, my name is Roger Cheeks. I'm a systems engineer with Pulse Secure. Today we're going to talk about global server load balancing of the Pulse appliances using the Pulse Virtual Traffic Manager. The graphic you're seeing is a typical deployment for a global SSL solution using the Pulse appliances, where we see a single URL per location. This results in some significant disadvantages for the users at the end, and of course for the administrators. You can see those here, right? There's no real load distribution or manual at best. There's no optimal gateway selection, and in many cases, the user can't really tell whether their specified gateway is up or not. There's no dynamic failover in the solution. It requires that the user know one or more of the URLs at the very least if they want to have manual redundancy. And then it requires admin or user interaction in case of a failure. In the tutorial that follows these slides, I'm going to walk you through the setup and configuration of a unified URL for this distributed solution. This is going to allow you to overcome all of the negatives of single URLs per site, including dynamic load distribution, optimal gateway selection, dynamic failover, a single URL for all of your user traffic, and no interaction during a failure. Prior to implementing the configurations in this tutorial, you'll want to follow these preparation steps. First, create a forwarding zone or a conditional forwarder for your unified URL. This should send all DNS requests for that URL to the traffic manager IP addresses, which you will build in item number 2. Those should be geographically distributed to provide full redundancy. In my tutorial, I use Amazon East and West for this. And then you're going to create a zone file for your built-in traffic manager DNS server. I'll get into this in detail in a little bit. Here's an example of that zone file. As you can see here, this is for a test domain, which again, I'll dive deeper into this configuration during the configuration tutorial. We start our configurations with a pre-built zone file. You'll notice that we have all of our single site IP addresses and names in the zone file. We also have a unified name which is represented by all of our single site IP addresses. We're going to move into the traffic manager in the background, and we're going to import that DNS file, zone file, into the DNS server zone file section. You'll notice that's a pretty simple import. You upload it, and it will now take that zone file. So the zone file by itself doesn't do anything. We have to put it into a catalog. So we can do that simply by creating the catalog, putting the origin of our test domain, and then assigning that zone file. So after this, we're going to enable DNS services on the box so we can start to serve names from this box. So it comes with a pre-built DNS server, so creating the virtual server is pretty simple. You're going to go in and create a virtual server name of test or whatever you want to call it, and you'll assign the protocol as UDP. And then for the traffic pool, you'll use the built-in DNS server. Once created, we'll have to enable that virtual server. We'll allow that to listen on all of the IP addresses, and in this case, it's an Amazon EC2 IP address. You can note that in the top, and we'll allow that to host DNS services. So now we need to assign our zone catalog to this DNS server, and we can do that by simply going into the DNS section and updating it. So at this time, you should be able to resolve names for your test domain out of your traffic manager. So we're going to run through a quick test scenario to see if we can resolve all of those names. So I use NSLOOKUP, and I assign the server as my EC2 instance. And I'm going to go ahead and do the individual sites first to validate that I get the correct names and IP address resolution. So now that I have that, I'm going to test the unified URL, which at this point we're not actually doing GLB. It's simply going to return all 3 of those IP addresses, which would turn out to be kind of a DNS round robin solution. So that doesn't provide any of the GLB intelligence that we talked about in the beginning, but it would provide redundancy for the most part. So now keep in mind, we've already built a second one of these. I already have this staged and ready to go. So I built this one ahead of time. And what we'll do is we'll test this as our name server to make sure that the results match the one, the server that I just built. So moving through this pretty quickly, you can see that these all match what we expect. And now we're going to move into the GLB portions of the configurations. At this point, we're going to start our global server load balancing solution setup. And for this, we want to start with setting up locations. So basically, these map to each of the physical locations of our Pulse appliances. So it's as simple as creating a location name and selecting it on the map. You can also select a country or do longitude, latitude, but the map is by far the easiest way to set these up. So as you can see, we've completed all 3 locations, and now we're going to create, after looking at these, we're going to create our first GoB service. So this is actually going to be the service that owns our unified DNS name or URL, right? So the service name is specific to the appliance. In this case, the domain that you set should be the actual unified name that you want to manage. So we're going to set that up on all 3 locations. And then we're going to create that service. So you'll notice this service as created is disabled. So first we're going to take a look at the locations and monitoring. So we're going to validate that each of these locations is applied. And we're going to tie the IP address of the specific location to the location in the interface. So simple copy and paste from the zone file and update this configuration as you walk through setting up each location. You'll notice that the location obviously matches the IP that's local to that specific site. And then once we're finished, we now have the core part of our solution set up. So what we need to do now is enable monitors for these locations so we can determine the health of the location itself. So creating these monitors is fairly simple. Make sure that you select the HTTP monitor as well as the pool/GLB monitor. And in this case, you're going to select the specific IP address and port of the monitor itself. So make sure you add the port into the back of it or it will give you an error like I did there. Once you add that port, it will now be ready to start monitoring. Now in our case, we want to monitor the Pulse appliance. So those typically have a very specific URL. And we also want to make sure we use SSL on the monitor. So this is the URL, or the path, excuse me, that the Pulse appliance uses. So we're going to add that as part of our monitoring solution. So now we're checking that path specifically. So now you can see we've built, in this case, a single site monitor. Now the Traffic Manager interface allows you to replicate this monitor very easily, so you can use the same monitor for multiple setups. So we just copy the monitor, and in this case, we're just going to update the local IP addresses after we've created our other site monitors. So the Traffic Manager makes it very easy to replicate these configurations. So you'll see that I update the IPs of these monitors based on, again, my zone file. Again, just make sure you update after you update the IP addresses. Make sure you click Update at the bottom. You'll notice in my monitors window that each of these is grayed out, meaning it's not been assigned yet. So it's configured, but you'll notice that when we assign them, they will have a green check by them. So we'll assign these after we finish creating them. So we go back to our GoB service, and and again, this is still disabled. So now we're going to assign the monitors to each of the sites individually. So just make sure you assign the right monitor to the right site. And now you will begin monitoring the health of that site. Okay, that being completed, we can now go and enable our GLB. So now we want to talk about load balancing. So this is actually the controlling mechanism that tells our DNS server, our internal DNS server, how to reply. So you'll notice I set up round robin here. So now the actual services should start to apply in a round robin way. But prior to that, though, I need to add this GLB service to my DNS virtual server so it knows to manage that. So don't forget this step. It's critical, or else you'll just get round robin DNS like we did before. You'll notice that I'm in a healthy state. I can check the home page and notice that my virtual server is healthy, as well as my GLB service is also healthy. Right, just to reiterate, make sure you add your GLB service into your virtual server. So now I'm going to go do a test to validate that I'm getting a round robin response. So I should get one IP at a time in a round robin fashion. So change my server to the correct Amazon instance, and then I'm going to look up the VPN name, right? So using my unified URL, I'm checking the others first just to make sure they still work. But once I start to use the unified one, you'll notice that it toggles through these IP addresses in sequence. All right, so it returned San Jose first, and then Plymouth, and then finally the UK. So you'll notice that again, it's just round robining those based on one at a time. So another method is to do primary and failover, right? So you'll notice here I've moved the San Jose site into my active site, right? So I'm going to do that on both of my traffic managers, so that way no matter what, I will get the answer correctly from both of those. I'm also going to update my TTL, right? This is another important step, right? So the default TTL for the zone file was 1 hour. Make sure under your GLB service to update that to 1 minute or whatever time you determine appropriate for your failover. Again, you can still see I'm in round robin mode. Now we're going to go ahead and look at the primary backup. All right, so I've activated my primary site. My TTL is correct. And now I should only get the San Jose site once I've completed these changes. So both of my traffic managers have been updated, and you'll notice now I only get the San Jose site no matter what I use, no matter which traffic manager I hit. So I'm going to simulate a failure of the San Jose site to show you what would occur if that site should fail. Actually, first I'm going to show you my local name server, right? So my local name server is forwarding out to these, and you'll notice it's giving me the same answer. All right, so I've simulated my failure of the San Jose site. You'll notice that it gives me a failure and says the San Jose site is now unavailable for this GLB service. You'll notice the log message. But because I have my GLB service enabled on an NS lookup, I should still get the next name down, which is Plymouth, right? Again, my name is Roger Cheeks with PulseSecure. Thanks for watching the video. Please contact me via email if you have any follow-up questions. Thanks.